You're building something incredible. But here's the question no one's asking. How are you feeling? The truth is, being a founder can be isolating. I've felt it, the weight of every decision, the sacrifices that no one sees, and the moments where you wonder if anyone is ever going to get it. And you're not alone in feeling this way. So in this video, I want to open up about my own experiences with founder loneliness. Most importantly, I'm going to share the tools I've used to turn those moments into strength. So let's start a real conversation, because this is something we all need to talk about. Loneliness is something that I find so many people being afraid of. And after doing a deep analysis on what makes someone really successful as an entrepreneur, as a creator really of any kind, is the person that's willing to endure what comes up throughout that loneliness. And the reason it's so important is because when you thrust yourself into a life circumstance like building the company of your dreams, like pursuing the vision you have that is beyond most people's wildest imagination, you basically are surrendering yourself to a path that very few people have traveled, let alone endured and actually actualized. And so an inevitable part of that process is going to be the loneliness that you experience. And I think when you can make friends with that loneliness, it comes down to the ability to understand the gifts that are within that space. You know, I think when people start to feel lonely, generally speaking, the thing that people will default to automatically is, how do I distract myself from my loneliness, because I can't bear to be with my own thoughts. I can't bear to be with the difficult emotions that are coming up for me in that silence. But if you can calm yourself, if you can actually learn to regulate, and I'm not saying, admit to yourself that you're going to be lonely forever, because I think that's ridiculous. Humans are a tribal species. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to be in a deep connection. But when you're bringing forward something that is truly innovative and genuinely visionary, there is going to be a part of you that separates from the mainstream. And if you can calm your nervous system down in that space, understand that this is most likely going to be the time where the best ideas actually emerge for you. You get to essentially have a competitive advantage that very, very, very few people do. And in my journey, I took this really seriously at a time in my life where it was incredibly challenging to step away from an extremely comfortable life in Australia, move overseas, but not only move overseas at a time where, arguably that was the worst time mid-pandemic to actually move to a city like, LA, where you didn't know anyone, you didn't have any support network, and I had no idea how I was going to raise my first investment round. I had no idea, how difficult it was going to be to make friends and build a network. And for those first few months, really for the first couple of years, but in particular those first few months, I went through an incredibly challenging amount of loneliness. And for anyone that has been through something like that, you've moved to a new city, you've made a declaration that you're going to put yourself on a particular path. There are no shortcuts to that. The process you have to go through is to wake up and have that sinking feeling, in your stomach and say to yourself, okay, today I'm going to find a way to get through and to go to sleep, and maybe have that same feeling of just navigating the ambiguity, navigating the unknown, not knowing when things are going to turn around and change, or when you might meet someone that starts to kind of open doors for you. It's a very, very daunting, place to be. Now I see stress and anxiety as a sign of inaction. And now that I've learnt to relate to that anxiety in that way, I know how to put myself back in the driver's seat of my own destiny. So if I'm feeling that uncomfortable feeling that comes with being a founder of stress, overwhelm, anxiety, the first question I ask myself is, what action am I not taking that's creating this buildup of energy inside of me, and how can I actually direct? Because it's a very powerful resource, those experiences, stress and anxiety, when you know how to direct it. How can I direct that in a forward-moving way that actually gets me closer to my goal and helps me become a bigger, more capable person in the process. So let's break down the different kinds of loneliness that you can experience as a founder, because there's really not just one kind. And I think the first one that's maybe really important to address, that is potentially the most taboo to address, because as a founder, if you're a founder, CEO of your startup, you're there basically needing to have it all together all the time, making it seem like there's hype and traction and popularity around what you're doing. And so there's often a lot of people around you and a lot of people that want to jump on your bus, so to speak. And so on the offset of that, on the other hand, to feel this sense of no one truly shouldering the responsibility and the stress, the way that you do, that is, challenging. And I think it can be quite hard for a founder to admit to someone, to even know who to turn to have those conversations with. So professional loneliness in my journey has been, really, I think the origin, if I was to analyze when I felt that the most, it's been when I've had people that want to put themselves on the same level as me, and yet they're not shouldering the same amount of responsibility that I am, and I've experienced it all. Like, I've had early team members that, jumped on the project for a couple of weeks and, gave me an ultimatum right before a shareholder meeting that if I didn't give them 50% of the company and make them a co-founder, they weren't going to show up to the AGM. I've had investors in previous companies that have had really large amounts of equity in my company that didn't really take any operational role, who demanded, so much for what they actually were contributing, which made me feel constrained and controlled. I've had all these different kinds of experiences that have shown me when someone's coming in to something that you've incubated and created, and they're probably inspired by the vision you have and the mission you have, often what they don't understand is the hours and hours and years of sleepless nights and, hours, weeks, days, months that you've spent envisioning what you're actually bringing to life. And I just want to acknowledge that if you've been through that process, that there's a value in that is so important and often not seen. So as a founder, you have to be the one actually to know the value of that, to understand that, yes, there might be people that can come in and they have the technical skills or the money or whatever to bring your dream to life, and all of that matters, and you need to be able to value that. But I think often what gets lost that creates this deep sense of misunderstanding and loneliness for the founder is it's not valued enough. The amount of time and emotional investment you've put into shaping and curating and believing in whatever you're bringing, forward. I look at In Truth now and I see a product that is quite easy to understand. People look at In Truth and they see their emotion being tracked in real time. And a lot of the time people's response is, I can't believe that doesn't exist. Why hasn't a competitor done this? Or it's only a matter of time before a competitor does this. But what I know deep down is to get to something so simple like this product and this capability and this new form of intelligence actually took 15 years of thinking and believing, and ultimately what was a very deep spiritual journey to bring that to life. And I can't expect those around me to understand that the way I understand that. And this is an important thing to make peace with, because when you do, you're able to have your own back. And I think that comes across in your negotiations, in your relationships as a strength and a unfuckable witness that many young sort of first-time founders aren't encouraged to really grasp and embody. The next kind of loneliness a founder, I think, experiences is this type of emotional disconnect. Feeling like you have to be strong all the time. And I've had a lot of people in my journey say to me, well, you just need to learn to be vulnerable. And you're like, yes, that's true. And when you have a lot at stake, I do think you have to be quite aware of who you share those vulnerabilities with. Having people around you that truly make it safe, who aren't going to see you differently. And the sad reality is, if you go to a team meeting and you put all your vulnerabilities on the table, that's going to most likely threaten the security that your team have. If they see their leader not having that conviction, not having that strength, same with your shareholders. And so how do we bridge that emotional loneliness as the person kind of at the helm, especially if you don't have a co-founder? I've never had a co-founder, so this has been something that I've learned to do, on my own. And the first step is to actually be able to understand my own emotion. I mean, now I have a technology that kind of acts as a companion there. And, I think every entrepreneur in part, right, is creating the thing that they that they most were looking for in the world. And I think in the case of In Truth, that's very true. But up-leveling my emotional awareness and being able to locate and understand what I'm experiencing is, for me, the first step to really understand that, in being able to better manage these waves that can come of emotional loneliness. The second thing that I've learned is to really have people close to me that have a strong connection to their personal power. And I want to explain why that's important. In the past, especially in my previous work, I was doing a huge amount of facilitation work, right? And there's this phenomenon that often different therapists and psychologists and facilitators talk about, which is like it's like a type of empathy fatigue, where basically you've listened to so many different people's stories and problems and pain that you begin to kind of lose a discernment around what's okay for you and what's not okay for you, and what you want close, what's healthy for you to have close. And this was a really steep learning curve for me as I stepped into being the CEO of this company, because I don't have the capacity to carry certain things that maybe in a previous life I had more space and capacity for. And if you have people around you that aren't strong within themselves and that don't have a high level of integrity, and what I mean by integrity is that they don't have the ability to face themselves and to have their thoughts, feelings, words and actions all align. And if you're stronger than the people that you're close to in that way, what is inevitably going to happen is they're going to victimize themselves when it comes to their relationship with you. And this is maybe a controversial thing to put forward. So I just want to sort of preface this and say, I'm saying this to you as a founder and an entrepreneur because I really believe that this can derail incredible creators, because they're listening to people around them that it's not that they have a malice intent, but they don't have enough of a strength of character to have a really expansive intention for you. And if you let those perspectives too close, what starts to happen, as you would know, right? If you let too many people close that don't have your best interest at heart, what starts to happen is you lose objectivity. When someone, it's like there's this thing that you can see really clearly, I don't know, when you first start dating someone or something, and then months go by and you sort of become blind to it and you start to let it go. It's because when you have someone close to you, you naturally will lose an objective view. And I am someone that loves to be very warm and very loving, but I've had to learn to be quite discerning when I'm first meeting someone and I'm first determining whether or not I want them close in my life. I really have a system that I go through that helps me understand, is this someone that is healthy for me to have close to me? And, I think that that's a really worthwhile exercise to determine in your own life what that means for you. I mean, for me, they need to have, a relative sense of self-security. They need to be working towards something that is kind of beyond something that is more like based around mainstream conditioning, because I think that can act those limited beliefs can act as a conflict to where I want my life to go. To have a depth of understanding and compassion that's truly anchored first in self-love, because I think we can't give to someone else what we haven't found yet in ourselves. Health is another really big thing, and wellness. But these are things in the past I didn't think that much about. So I ended up with a lot of people around me that didn't have the same standards and didn't value the same things. And what life taught me was that can actually result in a lot of unnecessary conflict. What it really comes down to is you should have people around you that have the same values that you do. Another type of loneliness I think that founders go through is the loneliness of feeling like you have this calling. For me, that always felt like a distraction from my present moment reality. Like I literally from a very, very young age felt this energy pulling me towards something that was beyond my current circumstances. And a big practice of mine actually has been, how do I embrace that vision that I have that's so real, that's actually more real in many ways than what's right in front of me, whilst also being present and grounded in this reality now. And that's been very, very tough, and I'm still on that journey in many ways, being able to be in both of those places kind of equally, and in a grounded way. But I'm sure you can think of someone, or maybe it's even been you, that's been so carried away with an idea and they're not grounded. And when you see someone in that space, right, the animal in us loses the trust that they have what it takes to actually bring that vision to life, because the process isn't actually that reality is pulling you towards it and you're abandoning the present moment to get there, which is kind of what I think I used to think. Now I understand it is you are seeing a potentiality that it's your job to ground actually in the present moment. And again, there's no shortcuts to that. What the process to be able to do that is to really, like, for me, the process has been hard work, working really, really hard to execute, one step at a time and prioritize in the right kind of ways that starts to bring that vision to life now in the present moment, and to do my best to actually enjoy that process. And finally, loneliness in success. We work and we work and we work and we work, and then we finally reach a level of success, and there's a couple of things that can happen, right? The first thing is it doesn't feel like you thought it was going to feel, which I actually think is inevitable, by the way, because the journey and the striving is actually the thing that gives us the fulfillment, right? Once we're there, as you would probably know historically in your life, that next Mount Everest appears. And we simplify life all the time. Like, we look at someone that's beautiful or that has money or popularity, social status, and we say, because you're beautiful, because you're rich, because you're famous, because you're popular, you have no problems, right? And if you do that actively in your life, what's going to happen is you basically lose empathy for what the reality is that those people are going through, which is the same reality that all of us are going through. We all have problems that we're facing. We all have demons that we're fighting. We all have things that we're trying to overcome. We're all human, regardless of, our levels of these various things. But when we do that, we then are communicating to ourselves. We're communicating to our subconscious mind, when I have success, I'm not going to have any problems. And so we're setting ourselves up for this deep loneliness and this experience that a lot of people find very difficult to reconcile, which is, I did all the right things, I exited my company, I made all these millions or billions of dollars, I'm all over the media, but it doesn't feel, it hasn't cured me of my insecurities. It hasn't cured me of these things that I battle within myself. I think the way that you combat that type of loneliness via success is to set your expectations in the right way from the very beginning. Like, your success isn't going to fix anything for you. Money magnifies who you were at the beginning. So if you begin your journey as someone that's insecure, as someone that's fragmented and not integrated and not whole and struggling with a bunch of childhood traumas and worthiness issues, if you don't address any of that and then you get rich, guess what happens? Those insecurities actually magnify. But if you actively work at bringing yourself to a place of wholeness, irrespective of what's happening on the external plane, as you grow in success, that wholeness will actually be amplified. And again, I don't think we have many role models that show us how to do this, but this is something that all of us can actively do. We can all develop ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. We don't have to wait until we've exited our company to do that. This commitment to well-being should be a consistent part of your growth journey as a human being all the time. If you're in this space, any of these spaces that I've talked about, and you're going through it, right? I think it's less about finding the cure for the pain and more about understanding that this is a part of the process, right? I remember in my early stages, when I first moved to California, I was Googling and looking for content from founders that were that little bit further along in their journey. And I was Googling things like the truth about the founder's journey. What's it really like? What's the psychological toll on founders? And honestly, the only content I could find was this person's article in Forbes and this person that did this really successful IPO and all the success stories, right? Or like these really boring videos on YouTube of like how to pitch. But no one was really sharing the human story, and it made me feel like so unsure because I had no reference point, no coordinates, right? And I made a promise to myself that if I get further along in my journey and I get my startup on track where it is looking like it's moving in the right direction, and I've done several fundraising rounds successfully, I'm going to become that content creator, because I want to show you that I went through the darkest night of the soul. I went through all these kinds of loneliness types and still do, but I didn't die. I got through them. It's a normal part of the journey, and I want to invite you to recognize that all of it is an opportunity to continue to unveil deeper and deeper levels of self-awareness. And if you can get committed to the personal growth journey that comes with becoming a founder, even more than you identify with being a CEO, even more than you identify with being a founder, this is going to be your saving grace, because you build such a deep relationship with yourself that acts as the resilience that I believe a founder really needs to not only succeed and not only get through these challenges and, stabilize during these turbulent times, but actually come out of those experiences grounded and sane and, a really good role model of what leadership can mean. So I've covered a lot in today's video, and I want to say, to wrap this up, that solitude can be such a powerful thing. If you think about prophets and gurus and incredible innovators, of our time and of previous generations, they've all had this in common. They've been willing to walk alone. They've been willing to understand themselves in these edgier parts of the human experience that most people are too afraid to walk. And what happens in these spaces is new ideas and new ways of relating to yourself and your ideas and your imagination actually start to emerge, and that discomfort is actually where all the beautiful things can happen. I hope that you can take everything that we've talked about in this video today and actually apply it, and what that could practically look like is next time it's a Friday night and you've been trying to solve this problem for your startup and all your friends are out on the piss or whatever, right? Rather than having FOMO or feeling like there's something wrong with you because you've made this decision to commit yourself to something that no one else has around you, that this can act as a reminder to stay the course, and to not judge yourself, and to understand that there might be lonely moments now. If you can use them to better get to know yourself and get to a place where you're not actually jarred by these feelings of loneliness, because you have a deep enough understanding of yourself and a deep enough amount of self-love that what you're going to be able to create socially, professionally, intimately, in your creativity, all of it actually flourishes and accelerates.